Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi. Still in Crete, Grace.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin.
Yes.
Still in Crete, enjoying the sun, the blue waters. Morning, Vimbai. Good morning, Rufai. How are you all doing?
Doing all right, Femi. Doing all right.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let me tell you what's happening around the world. We begin in the United States, where a lone gunman entered an office block building in Midtown Manhattan and immediately opened fire, killing 4 civilians and a police officer. Now, the suspect has been identified as 27-year-old Shane Devon Tamura from Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, Tamura did leave a double-parked vehicle and immediately entered 345 Park Avenue, which houses several major businesses, including KPMG, Blackstone, and the NFL. And he immediately opened fire upon entering the lobby. He did firstly kill a police officer. That police officer has been identified as Didarul Islam, a man who was married with 2 children and whom New York City Mayor Eric Adams described as a hero. Thereafter, the gunman, after killing that police officer, shooting him dead, he then shot another woman in the lobby who was hiding behind a pillar. Thereafter, he approached the lift, pressed for the lift, and when the lift arrived, he allowed a woman to leave that lift unharmed before he entered the lift and then rode all the way up to the 33rd floor. Once he entered the 33rd floor, he walked around, shot another person, and then finally turned the weapon on himself and fired, killing himself from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the chest. It is not at this moment known what his motivations are. He was licensed to carry firearms in the state of Nevada, which is where he originates from. But police have said that he did have a history of mental illness. This is just another example of mass shootings taking place on American soil, this time, of course, targeting a place of work, a place of business for many people. We have seen the images of many people running for their lives as they were being evacuated from that specific building and the buildings in the immediate environment. So very unsettling news coming there from the United States and their issues with gun crime. Let's move on, though, and we see that US President Donald Trump says that he has reduced his timeline. He gave a deadline to Ukraine and Russia to reach peace. He had given them this deadline of 50 days, but now he's reducing it. Let's take a listen.
Deadline of about 10 or 12 days from today. There's no reason in waiting. There's no reason in waiting. It's 50 days. I want to be generous, but we just don't see any progress being made. Russia could be so rich right now. Instead, they spend all their money on war. They spend everything on war and killing people, and it doesn't make sense to me. I thought he would want to...
goes out and starts launching rockets into some city like Kiev and kills a lot of people in a nursing home or whatever. You have bodies lying all over the street.
You heard there, Donald Trump is not impressed, especially with Russian President Vladimir Putin, who he says that you'll have a good conversation with, and then immediately after, he says Russia will then launch deadly attacks. So as you heard there is now between 10 to 12 more days to go for both parties to reach peace. It's unclear whether or not that will have any effect, because we do know that last week in Istanbul, both Russian and Ukrainian diplomats were negotiating, but they weren't really able to agree on much more than a prisoner exchange between both countries. That was literally it. Now, the meeting was the 3rd negotiation attempt in Istanbul, and Putin, it should be noted, has not attended any of these negotiation talks. So it just shows that perhaps the world may be a bit away from lasting peace between both of these countries, especially since we can't get the Russian president to actually actively, in person, join in with these negotiations. Now, Trump is, of course, in the United Kingdom. He hosted the British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen at his Turnberry Golf Course, which is in Scotland, while he was there. And it is believed that he discussed the ending of the war in Ukraine and also these issues when it comes to trade and tariffs across the European bloc, including United Kingdom as well. Clearly, those are going to be top of the agenda at their meetings there. But that's the crux of the situation. Donald Trump, who, if you remember, said that he'd be able to end this war between the Russians and the Ukrainians on the first day of his presidency. That has not been the case. And as we heard there, he talked about how he thought it would be much easier than it actually has ended up being. Finally, let's head over to South America, where a Colombian court has found the country's former president, Alvaro Uribe, guilty of bribery and witness tampering. Now, this case dates back to about 2013, but essentially, Uribe, who is 73 years old, he was president of Colombia between 2002 and 2008. He has been convicted of trying to persuade witnesses to lie for him in a separate investigation. Now, this case dates back, as I said, to about 2012, 2013, when Uribe accused a then left-wing senator. Uribe, of course, is staunchly right-wing, but he accused a left-wing senator of hatching a plot to falsely link him to the right-wing paramilitary groups involved in Colombia's long-standing conflicts. Now, the court decided against prosecuting the senator as the former president wanted, and instead started to investigate the former president. Now, these claims against him clearly have now been founded, but if we go back into the history, we do know that paramilitary groups in Colombia did emerge in the 1980s. At that time, they emerged in order to fight against the guerrillas, which were Marxist in their ideology, cared about socialism and the like, and they had taken up arms against the Colombian state for 2 decades earlier with the goal of combating poverty and political marginalization, especially in rural areas of the country. Many armed groups adopted cocaine trafficking actually to fund their fighting, to fund their plight. And we're seeing that created a genesis of deadly rivalry for resources and smuggling routes that continues in Colombia and the South American region to this day. Uribe is Colombia's first ever former head of state to be convicted of a crime, and he faces a 12-year prison sentence. Those are your stories from around the world. Love to hear your thoughts before we move on to the papers.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Femi. So a lot of people are also looking at the Alvaro Uribe case as there's a political slant to it because he's hardly, he's a very hard right person, conservative, and a lot of people from the other political wing can say, okay, this is the time that we're going to get him. He still has a lot of influence in the country. But he also did do a lot of work at fighting some guerrilla groups back then, but they're saying he's got links to them. And in fact, the senator had revealed him, but he's saying no. So he's trying to tamper with the weakness around that. So there's also a political slant to it. They're split along political lines. He's the hard right. The other alternative political ideology in the country are saying, okay, this is the time to be able to dog him. The current president says, it's going to bolster justice and jurisprudence. Some people are saying, his supporters are saying, there's a political debacle there. As regards Trump is, with due respect, bluffing. Because when I saw that story, I took all time to go check TASS, which is a Russian news agency that's been there since 1909, thereabout. I also checked Novaya Gazeta and a couple of other sources out of Russia. The Russian state has not made any bold response to him because they don't take him seriously. So what sanctions is he going to bring forward? Pull them out of SWIFT like Biden has done? Try to break their back and disrupt their ecosystem? They still found a way to sell their oil one way or the other. They've been able to consolidate fully. And you see, the window of opportunity of supporting Ukraine in this war was what Trump wasted. If he had continued with that momentum and they had given them missiles to be able to strike deep in the early days into Ukraine, by now we should be getting to a point where Putin should be feeling the heat. But what did Trump do? He stalled. He reneged. He tackled. He didn't give Ukraine the chance to fight. Then they set up a couple of peace deals that we know is not going to work. The peace deals that they have been discussing, even before the war started. You forgot that peace deals were being discussed even before the war started. Ben Wallace then, the top security chief out of England there, was talking to Shoigu and the likes, and they said they had assurances. But Putin went and started this war. So it's not that they've not been talking. Probably the best they will be able to get will be prisoner swaps. But afterwards, nothing will come out of it. And that time he needed to pound. Because you see, in life, Femi, you do not keep quiet when a bully is trying to push you around. You stand up to a bully. And that's what we respected America and the Allied forces for when they stood up to the bully called Hitler Germany. But what benefit does Trump even have to talk about Russia in that light? When America is siding with another bully in the name of Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu, and they're killing people out there. An Israeli aid organization today came out to say that there's genocide and there's starvation going on in Palestine. So the truth is, what benefit does Trump even have to come and tell us and be sanctimonious to Putin that he first supported as he was a nice person? Oh, and like he said, Putin can't take me for a ride. He can take others for a ride. But he's taking you for a ride. I will stop the war in 24 hours. You've not stopped the war in 24 hours. It's 6 months down the line. And it's going to continue because you've emboldened Putin. That's why we need leaders, not populists.
Right. On that note, I think it's certainly proving that it's not that easy to stop a war, especially ones of these complex natures. But I want to focus on South America and Colombia today because I did a deep dive into what they now call Uribism, which is a school of thought that was created around this Alvaro Uribe because he was a very popular president, divisive and polarizing, but incredibly popular. I went back to his roots and found that he was from Medellin, which was very interesting for me because, of course, we know Medellin is the home of the infamous Pablo Escobar. And it turns out that in his early years, he worked in the aviation authority. They don't have proof. They don't have concrete evidence, but they do suspect that he worked closely with Pablo Escobar to be able to grant some of his aviation licenses. Because remember, in that era, a lot of the drug smuggling was happening via air. Anyway, he later went on to be the mayor of that place as well. And if you remember Pablo Escobar, if you've watched Narcos, you know that nobody can be mayor without him having a say or approval in the matter. Anyway, fast forward to when he became president and he decided to declare war on these guerrilla groups, these militant groups, if I may call it that. Now, this is where it got a little bit tricky, is the fact that there's a controversy around him around false positives. And it's alleged that what he used to do to try and drive up the number of guerrilla fighters that he'd captured is that they used to actually kill civilians as well, so that they could report that so many of these guerrillas are being killed, and which created the narrative around false positives, and of course got him a lot of hate and a lot of dislike. He fought against the FARC, and specifically because that FARC had actually been responsible for his father's murder as well. So driven a lot by personal passion and a need to avenge his father's death. And many say he went too far, that there were human rights violations. But during this period, he developed a good relationship with the United States, under which they were able to conduct the Plan Colombia. The Plan Colombia bilateral agreement, billions of dollars went in from the United States to support weaponry and to support this war, alleged war against terror. Anyway, to summarize, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has issued a statement saying that he feels that this ruling against Uribe is unjust and it's a weaponization of the justice system, and just goes to show you that Colombia's politicization of the judiciary is not going anywhere anytime soon. Hope I was able to summarize.
Okay, 3 basic issues in Colombia. The first is that former president, 2002 to 2010 of Colombia, Alvaro Uribe, he can appeal, and he continues to insist on his innocence. Whether he will get justice is another thing. So the matter is not yet settled. The second thing is that in the 80s, Colombia was trapped in left-wing, right-wing politics. You had the FARC rebels, the leftist guerrillas against government, and then you had the paramilitary groups coming up, the right-wingers, and challenging the FARC on the grounds that they could promote poverty. They could challenge poverty and ensure development. Now, at that time, the United States was on the side of the right-wingers. Of course, they wouldn't want Marxist guerrilla politics on their backyard. Now, after leaving office, Uribe is being accused of having supported the right-wingers and ensuring a lot of human rights abuses. Now, the U.S., which continues to intervene in Latin American politics when it suits it. In Venezuela, you have seen how, the U.S. got involved, and now the latest case is in Colombia. Now, issues are raised about sovereignty of states and interference in the judiciary. I think also in Brazil, the U.S. also got involved in the Jair Bolsonaro case. So these are the three dimensions of it in terms of what the details are and the editorial directions. Number two, Trump saying that he is going to give just 2 weeks, which will expire on September 9, a deadline to Putin to down tools and withdraw. Well, that's not going to happen. And Trump, what he's saying should be taken with a lot of skepticism. He may be excited that he's in Thornbury in Scotland, cutting deals with the European Union and also meeting with Keir Starmer. He's now saying he's giving a deadline to Trump. This is not the first time he will give deadline. He gave deadline 24 hours. He gave 2 weeks. He gave 50 days. Now he's talking about 2 weeks deadline. Who is going to listen to him? Putin has made it very clear, despite the 3 meetings, the meeting that was held last week in Istanbul was the third one by negotiators. But those negotiators on the Russian side and the Ukrainian side, they have no powers to reach any kind of agreement. And that is where the problem lies. So what you are dealing with is tackle. Trump always, changes his mind. He always chickens out. He chickened out on the question of Iran. He gave Iran about 5 deadlines. Nothing happened. On the issue of Russia, he's been giving deadlines forever. On the issue of TikTok, on which he signed, an executive order in January, he's also been changing his mind. So he changes his mind. He's not sure what he wants. So I won't lose sleep over what Trump says, either with regard to tariffs, which keeps changing, and the other one. As for the killing in Midtown Manhattan, were issues again about gun control. America has what they call the Gun Control Act of 1968. There's also the Brady Act, which is supposed to control access, ensure background checks and all of that. But the Second Amendment says you can have access to arms. And yet, one after the other, either in New York or elsewhere, we see people carrying guns, and the excuse will be, no motive cannot be established. The person has mental health. So all of that should be seen within the context of gun control in the United States.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for your wonderful submissions as always. Let's move on to the newspapers. As ever, we begin with the front page of This Day, and we just continue on with the celebration of our winning women. The front page of This Day does, of course, lead with the welcome news of President Tinubu awarding each of the Women African Cup of Nations champions, the Super Falcon players, with $100,000 each, a 3-bedroom home, and a national honor. The president also shared how the First Lady, Senator Oluremi Tinubu, she almost abandoned her dinner because of the tension during that match. You'll remember, of course, the fact that the Super Falcons came from being 2 goals down, so a lot of tension in that match. He also, the First Lady also described what the winning women have done, said that they are shining examples of excellence. And we also know that 36 of Nigeria's governors, all 36 of them, have awarded a gift of 10 million naira each to the players and to the technical crew, because they can't be left out there. And then you have the chairman of the National Sports Commission, Shehu Diko, saying that the team's victory is a symbol of national unity, inspiration, and triumph of belief. A huge congratulations to the ladies, and of course to the National Sports Commission, to all Nigerians. Let's move on to The Advocate this week. Now, this week's edition of The Advocate by Onikepo Braithwaite is an article titled How Suspects' Rights Are Abused. And in this article, she continues her series, which covers examples of the lawlessness of law enforcement. This week, she explores the right a suspect has at the time of arrest. citing global examples of what many of us have heard, which is the Miranda rights, right? So here in Nigeria, there isn't the same type of Miranda rights as there is in the United States and the United Kingdom. But as she writes, there are similar rights provided in the 1999 Constitution, but also in the 2015 Administration of Criminal Justice Act, which provide for the right to remain silent or to avoid answering questions on arrest until a suspect's lawyer is present. So always a very valuable and insightful read on The Advocate there. Let's move on to the New Telegraph this morning, which leads with the transmission company of Nigeria's announcement of this 25-day maintenance. Now, the paper reports that the blackout that it's going to cause may well push up the cost of alternative energy sources to 2 trillion naira. Now, Minister of Power Adebayo Adelabu says that more than $2 billion has been attracted for both grid expansion and off-grid electrification. We'll wait and see. Now, the Punch does report on the federal government may be planning to sell these 11 discos to new investors. I know that you discussed this earlier on in the show. Let's move on to The Nation. We're looking at the inside page of The Nation. On page 2, there is an article on how President Tinubu has transformed Nigeria's healthcare delivery across the north in just 2 years. Now, after appointing Mohammed Ali Pate as the coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare back in August of 2023, President Tinubu called on governors, international partners, and federal institutions to sign the Health Sector Renewal Compact. And on the ground, there's been a lot of upgrade of 1,100 health centers in the past 2 years. And of those 1,100, at least 500 of them, more than 500 of them, are in the north alone. So it just talks to the targeted plan to improve healthcare access across the north of Nigeria. Let's move on to the Daily Independent this morning. And there's a story on the crackdown on birth tourism from Nigeria to the United States. And that's as the US Embassy says that any visa applicant found to be traveling primarily to give birth to their child in the United States in order to secure citizenship for their child will be denied entry. This move has sparked fresh calls for hospital and healthcare development, socio-economic development in Nigeria, which we've just seen from the Nation newspaper is already underway. Now, the Daily Independent also reports on the prospect of Indonesian palm oil getting more expensive for Nigerians. That's due to the country's new export restrictions and increasing domestic demand. Earlier this year, Indonesia did increase its export levy from 7.5% to 10%. So may well be a time to focus on more Nigerian producers of palm oil. Let's move on to the Vanguard. Vanguard reports that more than 130 security agents have been killed in the ongoing Katsina anti-banditry war. There's also the news of bandits, unfortunately, killing 38 hostages in Zamfara state, despite collecting a ransom of 50 million naira. And finally, both the Daily Sun and the Daily Trust leads with politics. The AMPP bloc of the ruling APC, they're insisting that they must get a slot for the vice president in the next election in 2027. But as we're seeing, Ali Modu Sharif says that is the president's prerogative. Those are your papers.
All right, lots happening. Thank you so much, Adefemi. Please do enjoy the rest of your working vacation.